The world watches in disbelief as Yemen, long written off as powerless, strikes back with precision and defiance. Russian missiles, Israeli warships, and a Red Sea ablaze. This isn't just another clash, it's a message. The balance of global power is shifting before our eyes. What happens when the oppressed refuse silence and the powerless seize the stage? Tonight, history doesn't whisper, it roars. Yemen's latest strike in the Red Sea is not just another military action. It's a geopolitical tremor that has shaken the confidence of even the most seasoned strategists. When news broke that Israeli warships were under fire, the global stage shifted in an instant. The Red Sea, a corridor vital to international trade and energy transit, has suddenly transformed into the newest flashpoint in a rapidly unraveling world order. What makes this development extraordinary is not simply the scale of the attack, but the message behind it. Yemen, long considered a fractured nation, has stepped forward with a show of strategic precision and defiance that few thought possible. The balance of power in the region, once thought to be firmly in the hands of Israel and its Western allies, is now facing an unexpected challenge from a nation underestimated for far too long. This is where the hook lies. Power, once taken for granted, is now contested by the very actors it sought to suppress. For years, Yemen endured relentless bombardments, sanctions, and a humanitarian crisis of staggering proportions. Yet in the shadows of that suffering, a new kind of resilience was forged, one born not of desperation, but of determination. The strike is not merely an act of retaliation. It is a statement of survival and sovereignty. It signals that Yemen's capacity to project force, even in the face of overwhelming odds, can no longer be dismissed as symbolic. It's a calculated move designed to shift the psychological battlefield, to tell its adversaries that dominance is no longer absolute. From a political and strategic standpoint, this development carries implications far beyond the immediate military encounter. The Red Sea has always been a strategic choke point, and whoever controls its waters holds leverage over global commerce. With Israeli vessels now directly targeted, every shipping company, energy investor, and government trading through that region is re-evaluating its risk exposure. The echoes of this single event reach into stock markets, oil futures, and diplomatic chambers across continents, and the underlying question is unmistakable. If Yemen can strike with this level of precision and intent, what does it mean for other nations on the margins of Western power? In essence, Yemen's strike has torn open the illusion of regional stability. It has demonstrated that in today's interconnected world, even a small nation can shake the foundations of global politics. The world is watching, and for the first time in a long time, the Red Sea is no longer calm. It's alive with consequence. The introduction of Russian-made missiles into the Yemen-Israel confrontation has transformed what might have been a regional conflict into a signal of global recalibration. When reports surfaced that the attack on Israeli warships may have involved Russian technology, the conversation shifted from mere retaliation to a strategic power play on a much larger scale. This isn't just about military hardware. It's about influence, alliance building, and the testing of boundaries in a world where the monopoly of Western power is slowly fading. The real story lies not in the explosion itself, but in the fingerprints left on the weapons that carried it. Those markings, both literal and symbolic, point directly toward Moscow's growing role in reshaping the global balance of power. Here's the hook. For decades, the West has operated under the assumption that military dominance equals control. But Russia's quiet re-entry into Middle Eastern geopolitics has shattered that illusion. The mere suggestion that Russian missiles could have been used by Yemen is enough to send a message across Washington, London, and Tel Aviv. The monopoly over advanced weaponry no longer belongs to the West alone. This is a reminder that global warfare, both economic and political, is now multipolar. Russia, through technology and strategy, has found a way to influence conflicts without direct confrontation, projecting strength through its allies and partners rather than through invasion. The implications of this shift are enormous. If Russian technology is reaching Yemen, it means that the supply chains of resistance are widening, and the old systems of embargo and control are failing. This is soft power disguised as hard steel. Every missile that strikes not only damages a ship, but chips away at the illusion of Western technological supremacy. It is an open challenge to the decades-long belief that Washington and its partners could regulate who gets to wield advanced weaponry and who does not. For Israel, this new reality poses an unsettling dilemma. It is not only facing the possibility of physical vulnerability, but also ideological isolation. If Moscow's weapons can appear in the hands of Yemen's forces, then what is truly safe territory anymore? The fear is not just about the weapons, it's about the precedent. The battlefield is no longer just about military control, it's about narrative control. Russia has found a way to insert itself into the Middle East story without firing a single shot directly, and in doing so, it has redrawn the invisible lines of power. The strike may have been localized, but the political reverberations are global, echoing through every capital where power is defined by control over weapons, trade, and truth. For nearly a century, the Middle East has been shaped by Western dominance, economically, militarily, and politically. From Washington to London, decisions about the region's fate were made in rooms far from the desert sands and coastlines that bore their consequences. Yet today, that grip is slipping, and what was once seen as an unshakable monopoly of influence is beginning to fracture under the weight of global realignment. The strike on Israeli warships by Yemen, potentially with Russian assistance, is not an isolated act. It's a reflection of that crumbling order. The message reverberating from the Red Sea to global capitals is clear. The age of one-sided Western control in the Middle East is ending, and a new era of multipolar balance is emerging. Here's the hook. When power begins to decentralize, empires don't fade quietly. They resist, they maneuver, and they attempt to rewrite the narrative. But this time, the narrative is slipping beyond their control. The Western world, long accustomed to dictating the rules of engagement and diplomacy, is now facing adversaries who play by entirely different rules. Yemen's defiance, backed indirectly by powers like Russia and China, demonstrates that smaller nations are no longer willing to remain silent spectators in their own region. The managed stability, once engineered by Western intervention, has given way to unpredictable realities fueled by resistance, nationalism, and new alliances. The fall of Western monopoly isn't only about military control, it's about the erosion of ideological dominance. For decades, the West exported its model of governance, its version of democracy, and its promise of economic opportunity, often enforced through military presence and sanctions. But the world has changed. Nations that were once dependent on Western systems are finding alternatives through partnerships that reflect their own interests, not those imposed upon them. The rise of Russian and Chinese influence in the region is not just about economics or defense. It's about reclaiming agency from a system that profited off their instability. In this moment, Yemen's strike stands as a symbol of that transformation. It exposes the illusion that Western power remains unquestioned and untouchable. The Red Sea, once patrolled confidently by Western fleets, now hosts a new contest of wills. And in that contest, the message is unmistakable. Dominance is no longer guaranteed, and control is no longer absolute. The old order is being rewritten not by the powerful, but by the defiant, and the world is finally beginning to listen. The Red Sea has suddenly become more than a passage for ships. It has become a pressure point for the entire global economy. Every oil tanker, every cargo ship, every container moving through this maritime artery now does so under the shadow of uncertainty. When missiles fly in these waters, the consequences ripple far beyond the battlefield. The world's energy markets, already fragile and volatile, react instantly. Prices rise not because of scarcity, but because of fear. Insurance premiums spike, supply chains slow, and investors retreat. Yemen's strike on Israeli warships has therefore accomplished something no conventional weapon could. It has shaken the foundation of economic confidence in one of the most strategically vital waterways on Earth. Here's the hook. The Red Sea isn't just a regional issue, it's the bloodstream of global trade. Nearly 12% of the world's seaborne commerce and over 8% of global oil shipments pass through it. Any disruption here sends shockwaves across continents. From gas stations in Europe to factories in Asia, the effects are immediate and measurable. What might look like a single regional confrontation actually reverberates through the wallets, budgets, and markets of millions. In the modern world, war doesn't need to destroy cities to cripple economies. It only needs to make global trade flinch. Yemen, intentionally or not, has leveraged that truth with surgical precision. This strike has exposed the vulnerability of a global system built on interdependence. The same globalization that once promised stability is now revealing its fragility. When the movement of one fleet in the Red Sea can send energy prices soaring in New York and Shanghai, it becomes clear that the world's prosperity hangs by a thread. Economists call it supply chain sensitivity, but in reality, it's economic fragility disguised as progress. Every missile fired across the Red Sea is a reminder that the global market is not protected by peace treaties or political alliances. It's protected by stability, and that stability is slipping away. The brilliance of this moment, from a strategic standpoint, lies in how it redefines the concept of warfare itself. Yemen doesn't need to win battles on land or sea to create global impact. It only needs to disrupt the flow of goods that sustain the world's economies. In doing so, it has demonstrated that power in the 21st century isn't just measured by armies or weapons. It's measured by the ability to influence markets, unsettle investors, and expose the weakness of a system that thought itself invincible. The Red Sea has become the world's mirror, reflecting both its strength and its fragility, and that reflection is far more unsettling than any explosion. Israel now finds itself standing at a crossroads it has long sought to avoid. For decades, it has operated under a doctrine of deterrence, the belief that overwhelming strength would ensure security and prevent open challenge. Yet, with the recent strike on its warships, that sense of strategic invulnerability has been deeply shaken. The very idea that a smaller, economically battered nation like Yemen could reach across the sea and target Israeli vessels has cracked the image of absolute control that Israel has projected for generations. This is not just a tactical challenge, it's a psychological one. The aura of dominance that once surrounded Israel's military machine is beginning to show its first visible fractures. Here's the hook. Power loses its magic the moment it is questioned. For years, Israel's deterrence rested not only on its capabilities, but on perception. The perception that its defenses were impenetrable, its intelligence flawless, and its enemies perpetually one step behind. But perception is fragile. The use of advanced missiles, potentially of Russian origin, against Israeli warships does more than damage steel. It damages confidence. And when confidence erodes, deterrence collapses from within. For Israel, This is an unspoken crisis because it must now confront an enemy that doesn't play by conventional rules in a world that no longer guarantees its supremacy. Politically, this moment forces Israel into an uncomfortable dilemma. If it retaliates aggressively, it risks igniting a broader regional conflict at a time when public opinion and economic pressures are already volatile. If it exercises restraint, it sends a message of vulnerability that its adversaries will seize upon instantly. Either path carries immense risk. The old strategic playbook, strike first, dominate fast, control the narrative, no longer functions in a world where information travels faster than diplomacy and where every act of retaliation becomes a global spectacle. What makes this development even more significant is how it alters Israel's diplomatic posture. Allies who once saw Israel as the unshakable anchor of Western interests in the Middle East are quietly reassessing. Questions are emerging in Washington, in European capitals, and in regional corridors. If Israeli ships are no longer safe, what does that mean for the West's broader position in the region? The uncertainty surrounding Israel's next move is itself a form of strategic defeat. The strength that once silenced opposition now invites defiance. The world is watching an unthinkable transformation. Israel, the symbol of unchallenged military power, is being forced to navigate a new reality where deterrence must be rebuilt, not assumed. Beyond the missiles, the explosions, and the headlines lies something far more profound. The voice of resistance echoing through the global order. Yemen's strike is not just an act of warfare, it is an act of defiance, a symbol of the world's growing rebellion against economic injustice and political domination. For decades, smaller nations have lived under the shadow of global inequality, watching as their resources were extracted, their economies manipulated, and their sovereignty diminished under the pretext of stability and security. What we are seeing now is the manifestation of decades of frustration, the breaking point where those once silenced begin to speak through action. Yemen's strike on Israeli warships is the language of a world that refuses to remain voiceless any longer. Here's the hook. This is not just Yemen's fight, it's a reflection of a broader awakening. From the streets of the global south to the trading floors of the west, a quiet revolution is taking shape, one that challenges the structures of global power and wealth distribution. Yemen's defiance, fueled by hardship and endurance, embodies the sentiment of nations that have suffered from sanctions, intervention, and exploitation yet continue to stand tall. The message is unmistakable. Global inequality has consequences, and those consequences are no longer confined to economics. They are erupting into the political and military spheres. The symbolism of this act extends beyond the battlefield. It is a strike against a system that promised prosperity but delivered poverty, that preached democracy but practiced domination. For too long, the world's wealthiest nations have dictated the terms of trade, diplomacy, and even survival, while others were left to bear the burden of conflict and deprivation. Yemen's actions challenge that imbalance, declaring that resistance is no longer just a choice, it's a necessity. In doing so, it forces the world to confront an uncomfortable truth. The current order, built on economic disparity and political hierarchy, cannot sustain peace. What makes this moment powerful is the narrative it creates. A nation ravaged by war, economically strangled, and politically isolated has managed to turn its struggle into a statement of defiance heard across continents. Yemen has, in effect, become a symbol, not of destruction, but of resilience. And in that symbolism lies the most unsettling realization for the powers that be, that even the smallest, most oppressed nations, when pushed to the edge, can ignite movements far greater than their size. The strike may fade from the news cycle, but the message it carries of resistance, equality, and self-determination will continue to resonate in the global conscience long after the smoke has cleared.